Welcome to the 12th Cast podcast dedicated to the 13th gate. 13th gate being all those things that we're reaching for during these times. Solutions, different ways of being and thinking in the world that are going to allow us to figure out where to go next and what the best way to unravel and create what is new, and maybe pulling some of the older methods as well forward that we've forgotten. So today I have three lovely guests with me, and I'm going to just start it off by sharing a little bit on, I guess, what I've been thinking about today. I had a conversation earlier and I was just discussing how, I think one of the big things that we're still dealing with, we've allowed Western medicine to sort of take precedence over some of our natural medicines. Sure, Western medicine can help in many ways. It's definitely advanced us further, but when it comes down to, all these different minor scrapes and illnesses that we have, my mother, they were too poor to basically, go to the hospital and get medicines for everything. So they would just use the natural remedies that was around them, and they worked fine. But now we go and we get prescriptions for a whole variety of things that end up treating the symptom and not getting to the root, and then causing all sorts of other complications that we then keep on prescribing other medication for. So I think, I just wanted to open it up and address that, and address, the suppression of natural medicines, especially during this time. So maybe I can pass it over to someone else, and I just needed to get that off my heart. This is what I've been kind of thinking about today. And maybe you ladies have some thoughts on that or something else. Observations, whatever is coming to mind, really just to share with the community from the place where you're at.
Oh yeah, we do. We have lots of thoughts on that. Thank you for speaking out in about, in this time, in this crazy time. A lot of people would agree that there are many ways to stay healthy and strong and keep your immunity going. And so the fact that this conversation is happening in a one-way course toward how we medicate society it's scary and overwhelming, and I'm thankful, for my white pine tree outside, but I'm terrified at the medicine people are swallowing right now, or taking, proverbially.
Wondering, what is the gap between, we didn't have anything go into the mainstream about take vitamin C, take zinc. This is what you can do, if you're feeling ill. None of that happened at all.
No, there's been zero talk of prevention or, laying a foundation of strong immune system to, combat it. It's all been focused around treatment, and the only prevention obviously has been the big V. What we're living right now is a pharmaceutical company's wet dream, really. So it's hard to really imagine that they have our best interests at heart, which I'm sure a lot of people are kind of waking up to, given the fact that they've taken 1, 2, 3, not been afforded very much protection, clearly. From the beginning, it's clear that there was an agenda with not, talking about any sort of prevention. They were poor people who tested positive in the early days were just being sent home with, get some rest. There's no treatment. But that, I can't imagine how fearful, how bad that must have been for people in the early days who, there's this scary thing, you've just tested positive, but there's no treatment. Now go home.
It was a massive red flag that, and I think that's why a lot of us quickly went from, okay, something's actually going on, like bioweapon or whatnot, to wait a minute, what exactly is this about? Because there are just too many things that didn't make sense along the way.
that piled up really quickly. Still amazed that the Prime Minister has already invested and paid for 6 more boosters, right? Like, follow the money. So people who are just starting to kind of become aware of this stuff, I'm like, go back. There's some amazing videos that talk about the history of all of the you know, the older families that built up the money chains.
And it's getting a lot more airplay now because Rogan is delving into that, and he has a massive audience. So stuff that maybe we've all been thinking about for a while is seeping in now into a nice strata of the population that otherwise would not think about these lineages and whatnot. But also, I think you're quite right to point out as a huge red flag, because you would think in a huge crisis, an unprecedented emergency of worldwide proportions, that people would be scrambling to figure out anything. Like you would have seen in other wars, like people being trained to be nurses,
Exactly.
repurposing drugs. Of course that would happen. You'd be finding any little thing you could do to keep pressure off the system. And that was the whole narrative, right? It was like, we need to do this 2 weeks to flatten the curve for the system. So you think that outpatient treatment or recommendations for strengthening immunity or things that you can do in the early stages to prevent you having to go in would be applauded. People would be sent on task forces to come up with this. Doctors would be sent together to talk and see what they can do and look at all the historical research and what could be repurposed, what could be used. And all of that was not only not done, when it was done, it was actually censored. It was actually squashed, ended, and whatnot every time. And there are many doctors who have since come out and said this, including, again, on the Rogan show, what's his name?
Malone?
No, not Malone. The other
Peter
one. McCullough. That was it.
McCullough.
You know, and very simple things like cheap things you can get at the local pharmacy.
Yeah.
You know, even if it involved like an iodine gargle in your mouth or nose, like basic medicines that have been known for so long and so readily available. But that's the problem. They're unpatentable and they're cheap. You know, and anything like that seemed like we need to shelve this until this supposedly vaccine comes out, which isn't a vaccine at all. Interesting side note, I don't know if you're aware of this, that vaccine comes from the Latin word for cow. Are you aware of this?
Chattel.
No.
Cow. Yeah, vaca is the Latin for cow because the milkmaids who would milk cows were exposed to cowpox. And would you know that your immune system can recognize similarities between things? Imagine that. So when people got smallpox who were exposed to cowpox, they didn't get very sick because their immune system recognized the similarities between smallpox and cowpox. And this is so acknowledged and accepted that it's the actual word they use to talk about vaccines. And yet our immune system is like the last thing that we're told can do anything for us. It's terrible. It's inefficient. It's ineffective. And the only thing that we can do to get through this is to enhance it, you know, with their products.
Just Western medicine, like they've, you know, nutrition isn't taught. There's so many things that were just removed.
Look at nutrition. Like the pyramid has literally been flipped. Nutrition that was taught for at least 50 years, or let's say since World War II, was all based on the grain industry and the dairy industry. And they, you know, when you think the fact that they, you know, that told you to have like, I don't know, 10 to 12 grain servings a day. And now we're learning that that's not, especially, you know, I mean, I don't side rail the conversation, but our nutrition, that so many things we've been told for so long, like animal fats or, you know, all these things, like it's being completely exposed now. And it was all just to support industry, right?
Yeah. The Green Revolution was that. It was the repurposing of minerals and I mean, petrochemicals for the most part, stuff that was used in the war. And they were like, what do we do with leftover chemicals? We're chemical men, we're chemical companies, right? Mining chemicals, they're all connected. Pharma is mining, is chemicals, it's all connected. So let's pour it into medicine. Let's pour it into our crops.
Like, like canola, the invention of canola, Canadian
canola
thing. Rapeseed was used as mechanical lubricant.
I mean, if they don't deodorize rapeseed oil, like really, like just a name alone, does it make you want to eat it?
Well, they had to highly treat it and
deodorize
it, a high heat treatment, and then they put it in everything. You try to go to the grocery store and buy something that doesn't have canola oil in it. Even now,
it's so sad. Yeah. You go to get your hummus and it's full of canola oil, and the canola oil, these crops there is so many pesticides dumped on these crops. They're modified to withstand the glyphosate. That's what they're modified for. So when people go into launch big arguments that genetic modification can be for good, they can be for fancy tomatoes, that's all fine. But over 80 to 90% of the main crops are modified to withstand this shit they pour on it.
Yeah.
And we eat it. And I don't know if you've been through the experiment, but I have, where your belly gets distended, you get addicted to these foods, they're causing suffering all over throughout the world. On every corner store, they're placing these chocolate bars with palm oil, all these super intensely bad crops that just aren't even smart for children to, for people to gain an addiction so that they can make money off of it. The whole system is so unsustainable. I hope it collapses so we can restart in a positive way. And we all have this need for health and healing. And then people like us, nerds like us, who've done these deep dives on these different areas, who sense, censorship like a spider, going, what is this powering over? Why are we being sold this crap when we don't have to take it? And I'm glad. I hope we're finally coming together. I really, really do. I hope we can make a difference in our communities, and we can make a difference in our conversations, and we can connect with those people that it's scary. It's scary out there. It's scary for people. We were just talking about how it's scary for people to, it's easier for people to say, like, the research is done for me. I'm just going to give my kids this cereal.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there, because it reminds me of that Dead Kennedys album. I think I talked about this with Marion. Give me convenience or give me death. I don't know if you ever listened to punk rock. And that was like the whole sentiment of like the yuppie age, like, through the 80s, that we were these lazy people who wanted to get something for nothing, like live fast, live easy, fast, like don't get dirty.
Yeah.
That whole, and it totally disconnected us from culture. Cult, again, from the Latin soil, really interesting. So we don't have a culture, we have this convenience instead.
The convenience culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's been shown with monocrops through the use of glyphosate, there's the super weeds end up growing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have super weeds. So it's the same thing that's sort of mimicking itself in the human population right now, I think, with the overuse of vaccines and the overuse of medication. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, we're just going to modify it and suppress nature. But then what ends up happening, nature is going to rise up, and she's going to rise up as a super weed.
Like,
So it's like, we can't ignore the problems.
Humans are guilty of hubris every time, because they think that they can be masters of the universe when we're finite beings. And what do we really know or see? Like, we have such a limited vantage at any given time. And
It's all about ego.
Yeah.
The whole, this science is settled. No,
No.
that's the whole thing. Science is never settled. If you're saying science is settled, then you're just spreading propaganda, because that's not what science is, right? If we said the science is settled when your doctor was writing you a prescription, smoking a cigarette and telling
Mm-hmm.
like you to smoke more to get over your cough or whatever, then where would we be now? There's so many things that if we didn't question them, we would have never moved past like really toxic shit. We'd still be spraying kids down for lice with DDT. Like, there's so many things that we've been able to move past because science proved that these things were toxic, and it's happened for hundreds of years. Yet right now, all conversation is being completely stalled, censored, removed, belittled. And anyone who questions, we have doctors and scientists putting their whole careers and maybe their lives on the line to come forward and speak out. It's one thing for people to ridicule them, but people to think that they have like some sort of agenda, or they're going to make some sort of money off of this, when really they're just taking great personal risks. it's laughable. Like, it's really like, I don't.
Because the pharmaceutical companies are not going to make money. They're doing it from altruism.
Yeah,
right?
well,
Oh,
exactly.
totally.
They're clearly not doing it. People
But,
like to say,
RFK might sell a few books, so
and people like to
in it with
say,
money.
and people like to say too, like, oh, but the pharmaceutical companies, they invest so much in research. Bullshit. They get money from the government. They get handouts from,
Well, they
everywhere.
do get a lot of financing, but sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, the best handouts they've ever given in the past 3 years. Just like lining people's pockets like unbelievably. And so when we talk about the science, we can't take away the politics. We can't take away the reality, the shared reality that all these ivory towers or whatever they are, all these systems that we have, how they connect, we can't not compare all of them. And so you have these often white men at, in these positions, making these decisions for the welfare of all people from a power over position where you can hand out fucking tickets. Okay. And we need peace and balance. That's not the way. Censorship and handing out tickets and fines is never going to get us more, more understanding, more wisdom.
Well, I mean,
they just got better and better at manipulating the public as time went on.
Yeah,
right.
I mean,
and if we look at the techniques that are being used, I think that's the main problem. Like, imagine getting rid of the media, right? Just getting rid of it everywhere for like a month. Boom, instant paradigm shift. So like moving into some solutions, the first part is awareness, coming into the knowledge of all this stuff, how everything's connected, how the corporations have been growing, what their incentives are, we know they're not working for the people, they're working for profit. And so, once people come into that awareness, do the research, do the homework, get to a place where they can clearly see, okay, this system isn't working for me. And some people are going to keep on getting dragged into that, while others are going to step out and start creating the new. I mean, people have been doing it for a really long time, but, we're continuously having to keep that creating the new alive. Right. So, I don't know if you ladies have any thoughts on that. I know you're all kind of doing it in your own way.
Yeah, I think it starts with us just deciding that we want to do things differently because we see there's a problem, and just getting out there. Like, that's what I did like 20 years ago. I just got in my car and I drove around the countryside, and I just stopped at farms and I just started talking to farmers, like just learning about how you actually eat, because like the average kid today will go into the grocery with their parents and see something in like a cellophane package or something wrapped up. Like, it's totally disconnected from the cult of nature, and we don't understand how these things work. And before we like point fingers at this farmer because he's growing GM soy or whatnot, like, you have to go out and get to know kind of the lot that they're in and why they've made those decisions too, and a lot of pressures that they face. So that's kind of where I started. And then moving back from there, I found farmers that I connected with that were doing things differently, that were stewards of the land, that knew that it was kind of like a false truth that these would yield higher or make us more healthy. And actually it's a scam for them too. When you talk to a lot of them, they end up having to buy super expensive specialized machinery that can't be repurposed, can only harvest corn, or these large combine harvesters that cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the more corn they produce, the farther that drives down the price at the market. So the only way that they can produce more money is to actually put more land into the production of this one crop.
And they can't keep their seeds.
No, in this case, no. If it's GM, no. And it's actually a big scam. And a lot of farmers, I think, kind of bought into it because they had these big promises and didn't realize, sort of the deal with the devil. There's a lot of farmers who kind of, I guess, want to get out, but then they also need our support. So I think, again, being stingy and snobby about the organic thing isn't really helpful, because we need to make better food accessible to more people, but we also need to make that transition possible for a lot of farmers. Because it's not easy to remediate the land. It's not easy to try to grow diverse crops. And the more I think we get involved and go and give a hand on farms and try to grow our own food and connect, we can really understand what that's all about and then find more solutions. Like, for me, it's been fairly easy. Actually, Quebec has a repertoire of organic farms. So you can literally just go in and put your region and
Yeah.
whoever's registered will pop up and you can make these connections. And
A lot of them are quite open to, visits and stuff like that.
Exactly.
More and more small farms like have Facebook pages or whatever, and they want to even maybe kind of get into doing a small bit of ecotourism or spreading, talking about what they're doing and kind of maybe converting other people. And not to take away from that, but I was just going to say, like, connecting with farmers, but also like having compassion and connecting with people who are like, we've all kind of been down this road for a while, I think, but people who are just starting to realize now, that are worried about supply chain issues and stuff like that. I think, we're going to go a lot further to have be supportive and have compassion, share my knowledge. If I'll help set you on your way, and, here's some farms I know about, and here's some other resources. We should all be like helping each other, finding these alternative avenues, because it's the same thing. Like, I've been eating organic for years, and I've always said, like, well, if more people eat organic, there's more demand, there's better selection, prices go down, and I've seen a shift over time, but it's still been really slow. But
but the shift has come, because I know
Yeah.
my parents were complaining about the price of broccoli, and I was like, well, the organic broccoli is still $3 the head, and they always thought, oh, that's expensive. But when their broccoli hit $6, because again, it often comes from farther away, you're not supporting the local people, and you have to factor in all kinds of extra externalized costs for transit and all the inputs. And if energy prices keep going up, because it's all petrochemical based, like all the fertilizers, all the pesticides, it's all petrochemicals. So if that goes up, the price of this food skyrockets. And that actually leaves people in a lurch, because they're creating a situation where they're sawing off the branch on which they sit. They're inevitably going to fall with this kind of pattern. And that's why it's one thing to say organic, because the glyphosate is very problematic for a number of reasons beyond the scope of what we'll be able to cover today, maybe for a future podcast, but also at the local security of the food. Because if it's grown locally, you're supporting people, you're sharing knowledge, you're making community connections, you're getting out there, you're getting the fresh air, you're talking to people, you're sharing what you know, and there's more resilience because you're not as reliant on all these supply chains either. And often organic agriculture does not use petrochemicals, which is the other thing, so with that, I think there's a war now on meat eating. And this is coming from someone who's a vegetarian for 20 years, but as I moved along on this local, sustainable, clean living, path, I've made a lot of changes. Like I have different views now on vegetarianism than I once did.
I think the backlash is coming now, in the sense that, like, with the mass marketing of things like Beyond whatever meat burgers or whatever and all that, people, I think people, I guess thanks to social media and whatnot, it's not too hard to find like how unhealthy those things are, in the sense that they're full of glyphosate and a lot of grain products, and it's highly processed, produced on a mass scale. I mean, for sure, industrial
Pig
farming,
it's disgusting.
meat farming is horrendous. I think the Kiss the Ground Netflix documentary did a really good job of showing us how completely fucked up our system is, in that like something like 70% of grain grown in the US is used to feed cattle. And most of it's pesticide laden, maybe GMO as well. When cattle can just eat grass, cattle can just graze. And if cattle is grazing, not only are you like, it's just this whole house of cards that needs to fall.
It's an ecosystem that's all connected. Like Kiss the Ground, they talk about, they move the cattle and then they're grazing over here, and then that allows for the soil to do the thing that it needs to do.
And it's a way
to replenish itself,
to drive back carbon into the soil.
That's it.
That's the thing, because it's actually our farming practices. When we turn over the soil, it's bad enough that we're treating all these grains with, shitloads of chemicals, but when we plow the fields multiple times per year, we're releasing so much carbon in the atmosphere that is actually a much greater problem. Cars, or the meat industry, if we could turn it upside down and get it back to some sort of sustainable, like pastured meat, would actually save our planet.
And that meat is actually more nourishing and you are full on less of it. So
Yeah.
all of our problems with obesity, all those cheap calories, we did not evolve to have ready access to that much carbohydrates. Like carbohydrates have been some of the most scarce things to find, unless you lived in the tropics where there's an abundance of fruit like all year round. Otherwise, you would be eating so little bit. Look at the epidemic we have of diabetes and obesity and all these other things. And I have this theory, and I don't have any corroboration for it, but that, there's like a gut-brain connection. And I think if you're putting into your body things that aren't giving your body everything it needs, it doesn't send signals to your brain to turn off your hunger. So you keep going after those cheap calories, looking to get your selenium, or looking to get your niacin, or looking to get molybdenum, or whatever that trace thing is it's missing, which is never going to be in there because it's highly processed, pure sugar garbage.
Yeah.
Right. Well, your insulin stops working essentially. And so you just, it stops. It's like the muscle is no longer working. So there's nothing filling you.
Yeah. You're less satiated, right?
Just like I said, I was a victim of that. I lived in the city. I had depeners all around me. I could grab wine too easily, chocolate. I lived alone, and I was mildly depressed. And as a super jovial person, I could get through it. I could get through it like with a smile and be out with people and get lots of needs met. But there was this underlying anxiety, and there's this numbness, because you don't want to, it's like a sense of overwhelm that you just need to numb, because you don't have the answers, you don't have the meaning. And this is for young people out there, especially, like, you don't, you almost, it's almost hard to tap into your confusion. Like, you can go to a yoga class and spill it out. You can, there's so many ways we can do it. We can, they're taking away yoga and dancing with people. And these are like therapies that we use to, express and connect. And I think that when you ask that question, I really love the question, Jess, like, what are you doing to go forward? And I love the answer from the ladies, how we can go outside our comfort zones and look into our food systems locally and support them, but also in these times of censorship and isolation, I really think it's important to get together in groups, in small groups, and to find those people and that understanding so that you can get that shared reality no matter what. And that, if we sometimes, when we're talking about science, we equate science with order, and then we equate order with safety. And that's bonkers, because safety involves all our needs. It involves our autonomy. It involves our, our choice, our dignity, and our connections with humans and animals and whatnot, and our food and our culture, our ground. And so I feel so grateful to be older now and to have gone through these experiences where I can look back and see what was dragging me down, and see what was confusing me, and see the different ways I can find clarity daily, because it's always a challenge, and as humans, we love challenge. We do. We love challenge, and we forget that adventure and play is another key here, like getting together with people and laughing. Like, I had a conversation recently with a group, a group that I don't know if I was allowed to be with, but call it like therapy in my view. And we got really dark for a moment, and looked at each other, and then somebody cracked that joke, like, you got to have a sense of humor. And we all laugh, because we all know deep down, like, that laugh is right there. And it's like, tough times may come from this, like all these poor decisions being made. We're being fucked here, and we may have serious consequences from blocking things, shutting things down, over medicating, not understanding the body in a more natural or a holistic way. There can be huge consequences from these actions. And I think that the way I look forward is giving myself those moments of connection and making sure that they come, opening myself to them, to have these conversations, to go out and try something new that somebody suggested, like go to a farm in your local area and find some of the holistic types, and and just get into the woods and get your feet on the ground if it's not snowy or even snowy, get your feet on those crystals and really heal or go for that balance of, there's nature. We're not apart from nature. We can't live in little boxes. In a zoo, the animals were all dying in the 20s and 30s when they put them in boxes. They're like, oh, these animals need trees. Wow.
Let's give them some medication. That'll keep them alive in the cell. Yeah, and especially now with all the, thank you for sharing that. That was wonderful. And it's making me think about how the food supply chains are changing. And there's tons of things going on in the world as everything gets shifted around. And so a good idea, a good suggestion, like I try to do is getting together with some friends and saying, okay, let's make this, and this, using whole foods, each person brings like a really good ingredient, and then you're making in bulk, you're getting together in community. I mean, that's the stuff we used to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People used to do that all the time. And now you were talking about individual in boxes, and it's like I think about individual wrapping, and we buy these little boxes, and there's these little granola bars or something in them, each one wrapped. And we could get together and bring these ingredients and just make a bunch, and it would be fun and fulfilling and more nourishing and less wasteful. And we're told, no, be lazy and watch more Netflix.
Yeah.
It's so convenient.
Convenience. It all comes
We'll
back
do
to
it for
convenience. Well, that's the thing. Like, I think some of us, like, we've been doing like group buys on things, like we get together and, we can get costs down. We can go directly to suppliers like that. It takes a bit of time and energy, but, I think in the long run, we're working on those supply chain issues. I agree. And I think that's good advice for people even downtown, right? Because Costco now is requiring, or supposedly is going to be requiring, to see the vaccine passport, right? And a lot of people are going to buy bulk at Costco and save money. Yeah. So you know what? Screw them. And go directly to, place your orders directly with the suppliers, get a group going. Yeah. It's the only way that we're going to fight this, because then we're just going to say, okay, these are the decisions that the corporations are going to make. Well, we're just going to work around them. Yeah. And we're going to start creating that separate system.
And the brilliance, I think, of this pandemic scam was isolating us and not allowing us to see each other. Shutting us up in our homes, like our own individual prisons, because now they're robbing us of the ability to do this work that we're talking about, and making sure that we can't make it possible. So we do just order from Amazon. So that's a really nefarious part of that, is that they seem to understand that this is a really threatening aspect, that we're clever and we're going to find ways around it. And they're trying to stay one step ahead of us, by like curtailing our movement, curtailing our ability to really be together. Yes, we have the virtual ability, but it isn't the same. Like, we can't make granola bars virtually together.
No. We're at a bit of a tipping point where people are starting to get really tired of all the constraints, especially when it comes to what A was talking about, the like connecting with others and social situations. Like, I think a lot of people are really starved for connection. And I think we just have to make that happen, and in that connection we can build stuff together, whether it's
just even creating different things, like, okay, what are the basic necessities, like what do we need? There used to be a woman who sold empanadas in the area. I don't know if
I know what you mean.
And so when she stopped selling empanadas, it was like a huge demand for empanadas. Like, these empanadas were selling like hotcakes, right? And it's just little things like that people are wondering where are they going to transition to.
Yeah.
There's so many places, there's so many needs that
Those
aren't being
cottage
met right now.
industries. Yeah.
Yeah.
That reminds me of, I have a friend whose mother is Mexican. And so his grandmother grew up there. And, you know, the families were large and whatnot. People had jobs and people were tilling land and, you know, working and stuff and busy. And so the grandmother of people, they would be the tortilla makers, because it's kind of a laborious, long process, but it's such, it serves as the basis for almost all of the meals. So on the way home from work, the people would stop off at the grandma, buy their tortillas, like heat up the leftover beans with whatever vegetables were in season, and presto, you have a meal. And now this woman has some meaning in the community. She has interaction with people, even though she's in her old age. She's providing an essential service that's demanding in other ways on other members of the community, and provides like so many needs for so many people. So these cottage industries, you really have to think about that, you know?
Yeah, and that's keeping her alive, keeping her healthy, mentally.
Yeah, exactly.
Stable.
Mentally, physically, and it's
Yeah.
helping out the community. It's helping out people who have busy lives.
Yeah,
with
it's giving
kids
her
and-
purpose.
Totally.
And we become so dependent on these isolated jobs and isolated from the community that, you know, it's affecting people's mental health, right? So
Especially kids too.
yeah, especially kids. So it's like, you know, find that one thing. Like I know even people were talking about like, okay, yeah, my place is a restaurant. It's private. You know, you want to come, like people can even offer meals and start selling, you know, you obviously it would be illegal at this point, but whatever, you know, if they're willing to do it, like there's ways of generating income that doesn't, that you don't have to be dependent on the system, and that you can connect to community, and that you can have more opportunities grow through that. You know, so I just wanted to add that in, like there's a lot of
there's such a need for affection and touch, you know. And I was like very social living in the city, and in Montreal I would disdain all the kissing, because it was like it would make you dizzy at the end of the night if you had a lot of people you were meeting. And oh my God, do I crave the double kiss. And I got together, you know, with some people that think this is all bullshit and have probably already had the thing, and, you know, are completely safe to hug. And I just couldn't wait to kiss everyone on the cheek. I'm telling you, like, how could we take that, you know, take that back? Take that fucking back. It's time. 3 years later, it's time for our mental health. You know, for those who I love, who are afraid to touch me and be near me, there's nothing I can convince them. I can't convince them. But when they're ready, or when you're ready, go out and hug someone.
Yeah.
And give a two-sided kiss. And when you're talking to them, see if you can sense their breath, because I've spent a lot of time in the woods. I mean, I think that some people are more isolated than others. Obviously, some kids are going to school. I say, oh, it's really rough for kids there, but a lot of kids are in schools and they're still around a lot of people. But it's just not the same when you're covered up, especially if you're a shy, you know, you have ASD of some sort, you are covered in a fucking shield, you know. And then the sudden school cancellations and sending these kids home alone. Like, if you have kids and you're listening to this, like, it's just like my sense of meaning has been really upped during this time, because you know, before I thought, I'm just going to volunteer for things, and I'm just going to, you know, go and see what I'm capable of, where I'm capable of helping, where I'm useful. And I'm going to try out for my community, this and that and the other. Right. And I've always been like that. But now it's like the sense of meaning is way more urgent, because people are suffering. I can feel the suffering more. And, you know, I would never, you know, I have the privilege of pulling my children out, not even the privilege, also the choice that I make for myself, of living a little more simply with a little less, and keeping my children closer to me. And this is not to shame anyone, because schools work so well, and for some kids, and some kids need them. It's not to shame the hard work of so many teachers or anything, but you know, I was really afraid. I was afraid of what my kids might come across. And so for my answer was to bring my kids to the woods with other kids and like-minded parents, to just play and be free, because childhood is so goddamn short, and we know this. And you know, that's a lot of play and a lot of time for me to put in too. But I'll tell you, like, when you get together during these times, and we're supposed to stay 6 meters apart, when you're outside, I mean, this is all bullshit. And during the darkest times of this period, I would get together with women and, you know, parents and all kinds of people that needed to get to the woods. And we would breathe in each other's air. Like, it's so simple. And that's why I say my sense of meaning has gone off the radar now, because I thought, oh, all this boredom and all this training and all this kind of philosophical doldrums that I was experiencing in the city and experiencing being distant from my culture, from my earth, could be totally reintegrated just by finding that deep woods. Even if it's, you know, in the 70s, the women in Copenhagen, they just shipped their kids out 45 minutes in little mini buses to find a way to get out to real woods, or, you know, to nature, to the farms, whatever it is, wherever your fancy goes. And I think that the sense of meaning can really develop from there. That's like definitely a way I see forward for people, is to get away from the surveillance, the mass surveillance, leave your phone and just try it. Like get wild, get wilder, you know, and freer in that sense. And in that sense, we gain more safety. Safety is not only from order. We can order our books and, you know, order our cupboards, but order comes from allowing things to live freely. Again, and now I'm just ranting.
No, it's everything you're saying is absolutely so wonderful. And you know, they professors around the globe have coined this time a meaning crisis. Like, we're in a meaning crisis, and I think a lot of that comes from being so addicted to the social media and to YouTube and to Google, and the interaction isn't multidimensional. It's all mental, it's all intellectual, and you know, there's this kind of like infinite loop that we can kind of get locked into.
Yeah.
And going out into nature, boom, like opens all our senses up, and then creates a new thread of connection to something deeper and something more meaningful. So I really,
And larger than us.
and larger than us.
Our problem is that we live in our own little minds, and you know, we're having a conversation before about like academia and philosophy, and it's all in our minds. These are all ideas and they're all concepts, but what real purpose do they have in the real living life? Like, we're being brought in with our screens to interact in a really kind of reduced way, whereas we should be out, we should be, you know, people are afraid to leave their house, but not only that, like, they have been for centuries been afraid of the forest, of the woods, of nature. But
because
it's like we've forgotten that we came from nature. We are part of nature, and we will always be happiest when we are in connection with nature, which is why everyone living, you know, in the post-industrial age in cities are so friggin' unhappy.
Yeah, the difference from
sense of purpose.
Think of all the tales that we
connection.
tell our kids. Like, think of all those fairy tales. Like, ooh, some nasty witch is going to be lurking somewhere in the woods, or some nasty troll, or some nasty gremlin, or some nasty
or ticks. Oh my gosh.
Ticks.
I was going to say, there's always something. Like, even we were talking, you had mentioned, like, now that they give the temperature with wind chill, it makes it seem like so much colder. And I know that there's a sort of pragmatic way that you don't want to get caught somewhere without your gloves or whatever, but it's really not that much colder, and it's just to keep people indoors hooked into screens, you know?
And honestly,
Yeah, well,
it matters if the wind is blowing the warm air that you're releasing from around you. So if
Just
you're
on so
properly
many levels.
dressed, it doesn't, but they fear monger about the weather to make you
Yeah,
scared to go
the
outside.
weather
It's
and
right.
fear,
ticks
just
and
live by
whatever
fear.
else.
You might as well just go live in a bubble, because what's the point of
Don't
life?
leave your
It's too
house
much
again.
risk. Don't leave.
Order your
Well,
groceries.
the idea, I think that like people forget to consider their universal needs and values, like to consider all of them, especially when we feel like low level depression and that kind of thing. We're usually not getting a need met. And it might just be something as simple as like something exciting to happen, some sort of intensity to happen, like so that we can have a sense of purpose, right? And the thing is that social media gives us this low level dopamine. It's like little caresses, you know, but it's not the type of thing that sets you on fire, like getting up on a stage holding an electric guitar, you know. It's not, it gives us a dopamine and a comfort level, but it's a good time to remember to put the comfort, you know, find the other needs in ourselves, because I think I have a sneaking suspicion that like over half of the population is mildly depressed or anxious or experiencing, like I've read statistics and I can't pull them out of my butt, but you know, that many people are facing serious mental health crises of, you know, that 1 in 3 are, you know, have gone to their doctors for it. So they're seeking treatment. And that's a lot of us.
And isn't that good for pharma yet again? To have all these
oh my gosh, the doctors come out with lists for you. They come out with freaking lists. And here, what would you like? Or, you know, if you have trouble concentrating at your job and you don't like it, here's some Adderall. Okay. And then, oh my gosh, you've been taking Adderall for too long. You're going to get a heart attack. So here, take an antidepressant to get off your Adderall. And to get off that antidepressant, you're going to go through shakes, tremors. You're going to go through a massive like heroin withdrawal to get off of
It
it.
goes back to that convenience too, because they do this with kids, like in schools. I see this all the time. Like if instead of realizing that maybe a 10-year-old needs to run around for more than 40 minutes a day and explore and be creative and ask questions, they expect this 10-year-old to sit like, you know, with their hands pleated in their lap and whatnot, you know, like just looking at a board. And if they don't do that, oh, there's something wrong with you. We'll put a label now. Now you've got a file open on you. And guess what? Now you're getting pharmaceuticals. It's the only way one can deal with you, because a teacher can't deal with like 30 kids in the class who are all like jumping off the walls. Instead of reinventing what they're doing because they see there's a problem, it's again part of that convenience. Here's a quick solution. I'll sedate you instead. Problem solved. You know,
and the zoo animals. The children are the zoo animals in the square boxes.
I've worked with young offenders who are in locked custody, and this is their solution to everything: drug them, drug the problem away. That's it. And really reminds me of that great Todd Haynes movie, Safe. Have you seen that? No. I forget the name of that actress, but she is like this well-to-do, privileged woman living somewhere in the hills in California, and like her greatest grievance on this day when the film opens is that the people sent her the wrong color sofa or lamp, or, you know, like she has nothing to do because she's a cared for woman. Everything is done for her. She has no meaning in life, and she becomes like obsessed with this idea that she's sick all the time. And she goes to every specialist because she's a well-to-do woman, and every specialist looks at her and can't find anything wrong with her. There's nothing wrong with her, but she's sure she's dying of something, or something is ailing her. And she keeps pushing farther and farther out into more and more of a bubble because she becomes terrified of the world. And I recently got this book called Uruguayan Medical Botany. And in their way of looking at things is that illness is not always physical or just mental or emotional. There's spiritual illness. You know, when you have no purpose, when you have nothing that fulfills you, when you have nothing that gives you meaning, that in and of itself creates like a kind of hypochondria. It creates like some search for something to be wrong with you. And I think there was a really good lecture I listened to. I forget his name. anyhow, he was talking about, he was trying to resurrect the importance of Freud, because again, to go back to the pharma thing, Freud has become replaced with microbiology, has become replaced with chemicals, has been replaced with genes. Like there's nothing else going on in your psyche except little moving parts and chemical reactions.
Serotonin levels.
And so this particular professor was trying to say that Freud was actually a medical doctor, and he actually saw patients. And what he saw was a lot of these, especially women, would come in and they would have like a numb arm or something with their arm, they wouldn't be able to move it. And he would examine their arm and there's like nothing wrong with it. Like there's nothing physically wrong with it. You know, and he would, and that's when he came up with the psychotherapy, is that he was trying to help these people, and he realized that what they were suffering from was not actually physical. There was something else going on. And when he coached them and he developed a psychotherapy, like they actually got better. So these things that they were presenting as like physical ailments actually got better. And doesn't it befit the pharma industry to malign him and his practice too, and say it's a bunch of hooey-fooey? Because whoa, you talk to someone and they can actually feel better, they can get better, you know?
That's why the placebo effect is so suppressed, because it is so effective. It's 80% effective, right? In all clinical trials.
It's our most effective drug. It's the placebo is the most effective drug in the world.
In vaccine trials, they don't use true placebos. They use other vaccines.
Okay, yeah. And so like
just vaccinate the placebo.
We really have to like,
well, that's true too, but they don't use true placebos. They don't use saline.
We really have to sit with that. People really just that one thing, right? It's like placebo is like 70 to 80% effective. Like we're talking about psychosomatics, right? And I mean, that's so far off from what the culture is reinforcing with, you know, all of the TV programming, all of the sitcoms and the movies and stuff like that. It's just reinforcing the bubble. Like you talked about this woman, you know what I mean? Just becoming so disconnected. And through lifestyle choices that just like completely disconnect people from nature. So if the culture is reinforcing that, you know, then it's just this perpetual, again, talking about the loop of, you know, people, I know people that have their TVs on all day long, right? And it's just like, they're just soaking it in. And there's a part in the television, like the television projector had like, for the longest time, the part on top, I was actually, it's, I forget what it's called. I could post it in the footnotes, but it's basically, it basically brings the person into the natural rhythm of the earth. So it's like hypnotizing you at the same time. And that's a real thing, you know? So, so all of this.
Yeah,
stuff,
we all know that feeling. I mean, I was a kid in the 80s, like watching a show just with my, you know, my chin in my hands, like, you know, with closer to the TV, as close as I could be, just like with the jaw dropped, and, you know, the mom dropping off lunch next to me, and just like completely. And it was funny because I was speaking to somebody who I would say awake in a certain way that I wanted to, you know, connect with. And he was being really, really funny. And he was like, it's, you know, just today he was saying it's television because it's tell-a-vision. And I was like, oh, that's a good one. Television. We're being told what our vision should be. And we're being told what our vision should be with everything, with our relationships, with the way that we live, with what we take, what we accept and what we don't accept. And meanwhile, we're like, there's this crazy search for meaning. And there's this, you know, we're forgetting in this scramble of listening for safety, our integrity, our like compassion, and all these really key things. And if that doesn't, you know, if like, I just hope that people start to go, wow, like we haven't been kind toward one another. Like we can change that in a day. We can change that in, like, I'm always influenced by words of artists like John Lennon that are like, if you're gonna, you know, you got to piss for peace. Like if you're lacking meaning, then search the meaning, because that's going to give you peace. So find your meaning. Like if you are empty, if you feel empty and like that you're lacking your, you know, you may know this better than me, is how to find to spark your inspiration and your connection and awareness. Because I think that for every artist, and like as an artist, I can say this, is that, like you said, Jess, like we're searching for meaning, and that's what we're missing right now.
But the meaning, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah.
The meaning is having compassion and listening and empathy. If we're connecting with others, we're finding meaning, I think.
That's a huge part of it. That's a huge part of it.
We just have to shut off the screens. We have to stop looking at the shadows on the wall and go out of the cave and go out and live and connect. You know, they want us to be mesmerized and distracted, and they fill our minds with all these, you know, good versus evil and superheroes and light versus the dark, all these stories that just divide people, because there's so much more nuance in real life than all that, you know.
And if we can
everyone is inherently good, like there's no good people and bad people, you know, like it's
the
just
majority.
misunderstanding.
I'd say the majority.
Yeah.
But there are definitely, I think there is a right and there is a wrong, and we've also lost touch with that. And that's also part of the wisdom traditions that we no longer are connected to. Right. So we're having to go back and retrieve proper tradition. Like the tradition that was really that was where we kept all of the wisdom through the storytelling.
Right. I mean,
all of the natural understanding about how the psyche works and how the body works, and, you know, how it's all connected. So we're having to go back and retrieve that. And at the same time, we're in a space that we've never been in before on our evolutionary path. So we're having to connect it into this new space. And, you know, I do believe that there is good and evil in the world, you know, because I think I've encountered the evil enough in my life to know that it does truly exist. But in general, I think the majority of people are good people. The majority of people are good people. And it's just the darkness of ignorance that casts the shadows, and that, you know, causes
and lack of communication,
or complacency, you know, just the ease. I really want to emphasize that, because Hannah Arendt wrote that book, Eichmann in Jerusalem. The subtitle was The Banality of Evil. And the point of the book was to suggest that here you have Adolf Eichmann, he's a logistics minister or whatnot, you know, for the Nazis. And when he gives his testimony after he was kidnapped, I mean, by Israel to be put on trial, that he was just doing his job, you know, like, and he even talked about how he read like the Zionist manifesto, and he felt like he was really doing a solid for Jews to get them out of Europe and to Israel. And by the time he had figured out they were going to death camps, you know, because he didn't know until like 42 or something. Even at that, he didn't recoil at what he was doing and step back. It's just like, oh, well, it's for the greater good. It's just my duty. It's, you know, so I do agree that most people are not evil, but most people can be made to contribute to evil by their apathy, their laziness, their I don't know, their ignorance,
willful ignorance,
the desire to fit in, the desire to be
lack
accepted.
of compassion, like you talked about, to not be able, or maybe empathy is better, to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Lack of empathy is a huge one, because like if you can't put yourself in another person's shoes, then essentially you're probably going to end up judging them.
You're not going to connect with them. You're not going to connect with them in a meaningful way.
Yeah, there's a selfishness that is residual, you know, when you don't engage in empathy.
And that's because these, you know, poor creatures, people, you know, historically and now, they're not given the practice of empathy, which is another really like key thing for, I mean, I think that the government should hand out, you know, empathy practice for everyone, empathy groups for people to come together, whether it's Zoom or better in person, outdoors. And you get groups together that can work through minor examples of major, like little irritations in their lives or anxieties through nonviolent communication, or such programs that help us work out our empathy, because we were left in the dark. Like you know, we're from a generation of grandmothers who were tranked out and rape was happening and trauma happening all over the place. And, you know, there's so many survivors now going, my mom was tapped out and didn't know I was being molested by my cousin, brother, whatever, you know, and there's so many facets of that survival that we haven't even begun to voice because it's so intense. And then you see it with the mental illness and the mental health issues. You can really, really see that. So that evil, yeah, it's there. It's there. I think that my hope, I mean, like, I think humans all need hope, and that even if they know they've been making mistakes, they've been powering over people, they've been bitchy to their neighbors, they've been unhappy, maybe they're sexually unhappy, or, you know, there's just so many layers to look at. And it's just to admit that. And then you have this space for movement, for letting go, for more awareness, for more empathy. And you can get together in those little groups, no matter how wretched you feel. You can get together in those little groups and find that healing space. And it seems silly and trivial, but it's a small practice that can affect large areas of your life, your work area.
Yeah, and I would just add, like, don't wait for mommy and daddy, quote unquote, government or institutions to tell you that it's okay to go do that. Like, or to give you the remedy to go heal, like all those things, or to be, you know,
Right.
how to be empathic. Like, and that is the problem, is that people have this mommy daddy relationship with the government, still thinking that the government is there to assist them and that they know best, when in fact they've already been raked out by the corporations, by profit, and, you know, and so on and so forth. So
the Queen knows best. The Queen knows best in Canada, at least.
So yeah, go be responsible for your well-being. You know, we're all working on these things and sharing the advice, because these are the things that we have learned along the way, and we hope that we've inspired all of our listeners today. If you'd like to get a hold of me to be a participant in this decentralized community, anonymous community, just send, you can get a hold of me through the information in the detail section. And I'd like to thank you all, thank all the listeners and the guests today.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you. Namaste.